Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the monthly webinar that we conduct at Knowledge Group. Today, we are very happy, excited, and thrilled to be welcoming Mr. Islam Adra to be our speaker today. He has some interesting things to tell us today, and I look forward to this presentation. Islam, welcome. A little bit about Islam before we start. He's the VP of Health, Safety, and Environment at DP World, and he's also the founder and principal at Accreditas. Islam, he's recognized actually as an authority in the field of health and safety and environmental leadership, and has a proven record of driving sustainable performance and well-being across global organizations. As a vice president, of course, of DP World, HSE at DP World, he plays a strategic role in embedding safety-first culture, ensuring compliance, advancing global best practices in the occupational health and employee wellness. Islam is also the founder and principal of Accreditas, as I mentioned earlier, which is a consultancy specializing in organization resistance, risk-based thinking, and HSE transformation. Through Accreditas, he advises multinational companies on how to align safety leadership with business performance and stakeholder value, which is quite some try thing to manage at the same time. He has extensive experience across the Middle East and in international markets, and has led initiatives to improve workforce engagement, leadership, accountability, and integrated HSE systems, helping organizations unlock measurable value through people-centered and performance-driven strategies. His expertise lies in building high-performance organizations, promoting psychological safety, and creating cultures of care that align with corporate sustainability goals. Before we kick off the webinar, I would like only to say a couple of words about Knowledge Group. It's been established in 2006, been extensively operating in over 19 countries in the Middle East, as we will see in the some statistics about Knowledge Group. It is part of Nima Holding. Nima Holding, of course, is the mother company that covers, if you like, Abu Dhabi University, Liwa College, KGC in the UAE, and KGC in Saudi Arabia, in addition to the newly EDUZ organization. Some information about Knowledge Group quickly. Operates in 19 countries, delivered several million of training hours, and has collaborations across the globe with consultants and partners as well. It has been recognized and have achieved several awards in the industry. Some of them are, Brandon Hall Awards, which have won with several organizations. Some are government, some are private sector, and has been nominated or named as one of the top 20 learning and development providers in the Middle East, and the only one in the Middle East, in 2019 by LPI. Without further ado, I would give the floor to Islam. I would like to just note one thing. If you have any questions, please write them in the Q&A. We will answer all questions at the end of the webinar. Just bear with us, and hopefully you will enjoy the topic and have a enjoyable session with Islam. Islam, to you.
Thank you, Dr. Rabia, and greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session on organizational health and well-being. In 2024, an office boy, or a T-boy, if you like, at an organization that I was doing some consulting work with, came to work and didn't seem to be himself. Throughout the day, some people noticed that, but nobody intervened, unfortunately. Later on in the day, The office boy came to the administrative assistant and asked for the key to go to the roof of this five-story building. Now, the admin assistant asked, why do you want the key to the roof? And he said, look, every couple of months I go up there and I do some cleaning. So today's that day, and I'd like to go do some cleaning in the roof. So she didn't make much out of it. And she handed him the key. And he made his way up to the fifth floor. He opened the door to the roof. He climbed onto the ledge and he jumped. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, the office boy did not die. He survived. But the way they describe the aftermath of that jump is his legs came out of his back. Now, after several days and several operations, and after he had come back to consciousness, one of the doctors asked him, why did you do what you did? And his answer was very simple. He said, look, I'm stressed at work, I'm stressed at home, and I couldn't take it anymore. Now, that's a very tragic story. But let me now give you a story that's 35 times more tragic. In 2008, between 2008 and 2009, a company in France called France Telecom had been recently privatized. And for those of you who have any knowledge of France, the labor laws in France are quite stringent, quite strong. And you can't just let employees go. And so, as a strategy to help employees move on, if you like, the leadership at the organization decided to make life miserable for employees. They started harassing. And as a result, between 2008 and 2009, 35 employees at France Telecom took their lives. 35 employees, right? Now, as a result of this, France Telecom has had to rebrand, obviously, so they're now called Orange. But stories like this is what motivates me to wake up in the morning and to try and help, organizations do something about this. As Dr. Rabia mentioned, my name is Islam. I'm a health and safety professional with almost 2 decades now of experience in high-risk industries. And unfortunately, that kind of gives off uh, around how old I am. I'm starting to get pretty old. Um, I've worked as a senior leader in several Fortune and FTSE 100s. Currently VP Health and Safety at DP World, where I look after MENA, Middle East, North Africa, and the subcontinent region, the highest risk parts of the company. And I'm currently finalizing my PhD. A long journey since 2017. I'm currently at a phase where I'm just waiting for my defense. And I specialize, in organizational health and well-being. And the topic of my thesis is about safety leadership. Now, today, ladies and gentlemen, I know a lot of us are fasting, so I'm going to keep it quite light for you. And what I'm going to do today is it's going to be a lot of stories about organizations. We're going to start off by talking about what exactly do we mean by healthy organizations? What is a healthy organization? And we're going to move on to talk about the Bradley curve. Now, this is a magical curve that describes a word that starts with the letter C. And I'll talk a bit more about that a bit later. But that magical word that starts with the letter C is critical to achieve healthy organizations. And finally, we'll bring everything together and talk about the power of leadership. Because leaders are the most important element in the equation that can help drive healthy organizations. So with that, let us jump into story number 1. The organization that I'm going to speak about is one of the world's most valuable startups. And let me tell you a bit about how they were founded. So the two founders were at a tech conference in Paris in 2008. And the conference was over and they went outside waiting for their taxi in the rain. And after a bit of frustration, one of the founders said to the other, hey, don't you think it would be so cool if I could pick up my phone, order a taxi, and then wait inside in the heat while we wait for this taxi because we can kind of track where they are and how many minutes it would take them to arrive. Wouldn't that be so cool? And thus was founded this company. It disrupted global transportation. It has millions of drivers around the world. But unfortunately, despite this success, in 2017, after lots of battles with regulatory bodies and lots of scandals, etc., it lost $26 billion. Not only because of what was happening external to the company, but because of poor, toxic culture. Culture where there were sexual harassments throughout the organization. There was a cutthroat kind of culture where, hey, we need to succeed at any cost. And so as a result, it lost $26 billion. Now, in the chat, I can't see the chat, but maybe Dr. Rabia, you can help me with that. Can you guess what organization we're talking about here? Who's the lucky winner
I
that's
think you
going to
can
guess?
type your answers to this question in the chat or in the Q&A, and I will be more than happy to.
Anybody have any idea what organization we're talking about?
Right. I got an answer. Uber.
That is absolutely
We
correct.
have
So
one Uber.
Uber, 2017, lost
We have another
$26
Uber.
billion. Awesome. So let me jump on to a more positive note now. Let's talk about Ford Motor Company. And in 2006 to 2008, the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. In 2006, the company hired Alan Mulally to be CEO of Ford Motor Company. Now, Alan Mulally comes from Boeing, and he spent 37 years at Boeing. And in his most recent job at Boeing, he was executive vice president of the company. Now, just to give you, and Alan Mulally is credited with bringing Ford Motor Company back to life. He is credited with transforming the organization and making it into a powerhouse, automotive powerhouse, and a very successful organization. Now, just to give you a glimpse of how he did that, I'm going to tell you a story from his second in command, uh, Mark Fields, his name was. And you can find this online. He's got a video where he talks about this. But Mark Fields basically says that in the month that Alan joined, he did something unorthodox. He did something very different. Now, traditionally at Ford, the way they reviewed their business plan was they would do so once a year. At the end of the year, they would review their business plan, and that was how they did things. Now, Alan Mulally, the new CEO, wanted to do things differently. He wanted to review the Ford business plan once a week. And the objective was to do it in less than half a day. So huge objective there. So first meeting, and the meeting runs as follows. You're as a business unit, so Ford America, Ford Europe, Ford Pacific, each of them would present standard charts, and those charts would look as follows. You're either green, you're on plan and everything's under control. You're either yellow, you're not on plan, but you've got a plan to get back on plan, or you're red. You're not on plan and you don't have a plan to get back in control. Now, before the meeting, Mark Fields, the person that's telling the story, with his team, they decide to put the color red because they were launching the Edge and the vehicle had a problem with the tailgate. And so they decide to put it as red. So they attend this meeting, first meeting, and Mark Fields is the first to present the Americas region. So he presents his charts. They look at the charts and it's red. Now, the meeting room had a table, round table, the Thunderbird room. And Mark says that you could feel the chairs moving away from him. And what that basically means is people were kind of getting away from him because they were scared about what was going to happen next. Because traditionally at Ford, if you had bad news, that was not good for your career, right? Bad things would happen if you brought bad news. So everybody started to move away from Mark. But what Alan did next changed this company forever. He looked at Mark and he clapped. And he said, "Thank you for your transparency." And according to Mark Fields, this changed the company, as I mentioned. This radically transformed the company. Now, Alan Mulally, this new CEO, he introduced something at Boeing called the Working Together Management System. We're used to safety management systems. We're used to quality management systems. He came up with the Working Together system at Boeing, and he perfected it at Ford. And I just want you to take note of the first point on this screen here. People first. Keep that in mind. We'll come back to it a bit later. Now, we've talked about several stories. We've got several data points. What is a healthy organization? Now, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, there is no consensus in the literature about what we mean by a healthy organization. There's a lot of conflicts, if you like. There's no consensus. But one thing is for sure, there's a lot of common elements between the different definitions in the literature. And many of these definitions use this definition from the World Health Organization from 1948 to define their definition. And I just want to read it. Health is the state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not only the absence of a disease or a disability. In other words, just because you don't have a disease or a disability doesn't mean that you are in a healthy state. So a lot of them use this definition. Now, we had several data points. We talked about France Telecom. We talked about Ford Motor Company. We talked about Uber. And I hope you can come to the conclusion that a healthy organization does not necessarily mean that it's an organization that is doing well financially only, right? I'm sure we can all come to that conclusion. It's not about operational efficiency. It's not about the quality of the product. It's about much more than that. And some of the common elements you'll find among the definitions in the literature is that an organization that is healthy is one that has a high focus on employee well-being, whether that's physical, so physical safety, whether that's mental health, or whether that's social, if we talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But in addition to having employee well-being, several of the definitions talk about operational performance. So not only do you have to have employees that are in a good, healthy state, but also you need to be doing well. Because if you just have healthy employees, you're not going to have a business. You need to be doing well. So an organization that is healthy in a well-rounded manner. They treat their employees well, but they also do well from an operational efficiency perspective, from a performance perspective. Now, what happens if we don't get employee well-being correct? Now, according to the International Labor Organization, workplace fatalities and injuries cost the world economy 5.4% of global GDP. We're not talking about millions of dollars or billions of dollars here. We're talking about trillions of dollars, right? Trillions of dollars. Let that sink in. And as that number trickles down to the individual company level, that number can be pretty handicapping for organizations. The World Health Organization, on the other hand, estimates that mental health issues cost the world economy $1 trillion in lost productivity. Again, a huge number. So if you don't get employee well-being correct, that could have tremendous costs for your organization. You could be doing well in the short term, but the risk is that in the long term, you will not be sustainable. Now, I want to tell you the story of another organization because I want to introduce you to the Bradley curve. And to do so, I want to give some context to the Bradley curve. I want you to tell me what you think I'm showing on the screen. So 1998 is a defining moment for this company. The company changed radically from 1998, right? Before 1998, the company focused on safety. They treated safety, and we're talking about physical safety here. They put a lot of emphasis on physical safety. But despite that emphasis, they were still killing people. People were dying. The management is doing the best they could, but people were still dying at work until 1998. And something happened in 1998 that changed the company forever. And I want you maybe in the chat, if you could guess what the top picture is, we'll have another winner, if you like. Right? And it's not a roundabout. I get that every time I show this picture. It is not a roundabout. What do you think we're showing in the top picture? And Dr. Rabia, if anybody has any idea what the top picture is, please share that with me.
And I'm trying to figure it out myself.
Oh, really? What do you think the top picture? So it's the bottom picture is the same as the top picture. It's just 10 years apart. What do you think
I
the top
tell you,
picture is?
leaves upon. Right? Yeah. Well, some I have an answer says 10 years change. Yeah, but what does it resemble?
So maybe let me give you kind of a hint. So an accident happened in 1998 that changed the company forever.
So
And
it seems like the houses have slipped into some sort of a. So there is a landslide, something. All the houses went down the swamp.
yeah,
And
so
then,
so all that is correct. So it's a mine and the houses started
uh,
to
here's my mind, and then we bury the evidence and make a park on top of it.
No, but that's a good one. Actually, the top picture represents a
Maurice said a
memorial.
cemetery.
It's a cemetery. It's a
All right,
memorial. All right,
all
so
right. So it's a memorial.
you can kind of imagine what happened. Let me share a video with you to
Yeah.
explain what
Good job,
happened.
Maurice Abondo actually got this as a cemetery.
Good job,
Right.
Maurice. So let's get in detail what happened. right. So that was another tragic story. So one person got caught inside the mine. 32 of his 10 of his colleagues went inside to rescue him. After 9 days, that first person was managed to be saved, but the 10 ended up losing their lives. Now, in terms of costs to this accident, what we know, what has been made public is that this accident cost that particular organization $25 million just in rescue costs alone. $25 million. That's all we know. But one thing we also know is if you look at the stock price of this organization, a couple of, in the months that followed this accident, the stock price fell 30%. That is a massive impact on the organization. Huge
And I
impact,
mean, compared to
30%.
some,
Sorry, Rabia, you're saying something? Oh, Rabia,
yes.
so you're saying something? Sorry, I
No, no,
heard you
no,
say.
no, 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 no. I was just talking out loud to myself that it is very sad. I mean, not to mention probably there are tons of lawsuits that actually the
Oh yeah,
company.
absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. So, um, it caught the stock price got hit by 30%, so huge cost. Now, as you saw from the video, there were several things that this organization did. So the organization decided, hey, we need to do something about this. We can't continue killing people. So you may have seen from the video, they introduced things like the HSE right? This is a massive system that they introduced in line with ISO 14,000, 9,000, and at the time OSHAS 18,001, which is now very similar to 45,001. But they introduced a system like that, but it was much heavier than these standards. And a lot of contractors said, "Hey, we don't want to work with you. It's just too heavy. It's not worth it for us." They introduced audits. So we had a global team of audits that would go to each of the sites. They would audit and they would send the reports back to the CEO's office. The CEO would review the audit results. And if there were low performers, those heads of the business units would be relieved from duty. They were fired, basically. Bonuses were tied to safety performance. So they did a lot of these things. Now, initially, not much changed at this company because the employees at this company said, hey, we've seen this story many, many times before. Accident happens, the leadership focuses on safety, and then a couple of months later, things change. So it's a knee-jerk reaction. But the leadership at this organization definitely wanted to change. They did not want to continue killing people. So they introduced further things, and they were persistent. So they introduced things like if there was an opening in the company, you had to be a great safety leader to get that position. You could not be promoted to that position if you did not have great safety standards. Another thing they did is they introduced safety interactions, which forced leaders into the field. Now, with this persistence, right, we saw from the video that the safety statistics at this organization started to improve. In fact, from 2019 to date, this is a company with 50,000 employees. To date, they have not had a fatality, right? So this is the story of a FTSE 100 company. And I want to introduce the Bradley curve using this story. And I want to ask you guys a question, and girls a question. What changed between before 1998 and post 1998? What was the major change between those two dates? Because before 1998, the company had HSE managers. Post 1998, they had HSE managers as well. They had an HSE department. Post 1998, they had an HSE department as well. They had policies and procedures and management systems. They had the same before 1998, post 1998 as well. But before 1998, they had very high injury rates, whereas post 1998, the injury rates went down. My question to you is, and maybe in the chat if somebody has an idea, what changed at this company in 1998 that resulted in a drastic improvement in their performance? What changed? Does anybody have any ideas? And Dr. Rabi, I'll need your assistance here again.
I'm on it. I'm sure they adopted a safety first
The safety was first before
policy.
1998 as well. What changed at this company?
They took it seriously.
They took it seriously. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what changed.
Management taking responsibility. I got an answer here.
Okay.
Like leadership taking responsibility for that.
Okay. What changed? I'm looking for a word that starts with C. It's a magical word. And what changed is that word,
Consistency,
basically.
competence,
No,
credibility,
no.
care.
What ch
I got care
Care?
from Michael.
Almost. It's a bigger word than care. It encompasses
Careful.
care. So what changed is the culture at this organization. And I'm going to explain to you how that changed using this curve. It's a very neat curve. I love this curve. It does a very good job explaining what changed at this organization. And you can use this curve to explain really any culture change. You can use it with physical safety. You can use it with mental health. You can use it with DEI. You can use it with quality. So it's a really neat curve. I'm going to explain it using physical safety, but again, you can apply it to really any drive in culture. And any organization would want to adopt kind of the philosophy behind this curve. But let me start off by explaining the first phase of this curve. The first phase is called the natural instincts phase. And the natural instincts phase basically means the company has nothing in place, like a startup company, nothing in place, and they depend on employees for the safety of the organization, right? Now, different people will lie on different parts of the curve. It really depends on your upbringing. It depends on your education. It depends on the risk appetite of the country that you're living in, whether it's a risky country or not, depending on how people look at a risk and safety. So where you lie on the curve will depend on those factors. If we look at other things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, again, you can use the same curve for DEI as well. Where you lie on this curve will depend on your upbringing, the culture in the country, how they view DEI, etc. Where you lie will depend on that. Now, going back to kind of the safety piece, just to explain what natural instincts means. When my daughter was 3 years old, she was obsessed with the oven. Every time we would cook, she wanted to touch the oven or go inside it. And my wife and I said, hey, Mimi is going to hurt herself. If we continue like this, she's going to hurt herself. So, being the safety person that I am, I came to my wife and I said, I've got an idea. I'm going to buy some barriers, and every time we cook, I'm going to put the barriers up, and then that's going to prevent her from getting access to the oven. Now, for those of you who have kids, you know that kids will find a way under, over, they will find a way to get to whatever they want. So, this is what I did. I called my daughter over and I said, Mimi, give me your hand. Right? I let go of the barrier idea. My wife said it was not a good idea. I took her hand. We opened the oven. We turned the oven on, and I brought her hand real close to the oven until she pulled it away. And I said, Mimi, oh. And from that point onwards, every time we would cook, Mimi would come up to the oven and say, Baba, oh, oh. So natural instincts, right? Now, companies that depend on employees' natural instincts don't do too well, right? They have a lot of accidents, as you can see. Our aim is to get to the lower ends of the curve. So if you were a startup company, you had nothing in place, what could you do to improve your culture, if you like, or your safety statistics? And Dr. Rabia, if you have ideas, let me know. What can you do if you have nothing in place? What could you do to improve the safety statistics in the organization? Maybe put it in the chat if you guys have any ideas. Or Dr. Rabia, you can share your thoughts as well.
Well, you're putting me on the spot, but
Yeah.
I'll actually role modeling is something important, of course,
Okay.
in organizations.
So
Uh,
imagine you had nothing in place. You're a startup company, nothing's in place. We're having safety accidents. What can we do to improve that state?
I mean, we know that rewards and punishments don't work because people always try to be smart and find ways around them.
Okay.
Uh, if we're talking about something organizational, I'd say we implement organizational values. I have on-job training from one of the
Okay.
participants,
So
but
you've mentioned a couple of good points. So you mentioned training, for example, right? You mentioned rewards and punishment, and that's
that's
what
from
actually
Maurice. Yeah, and
Maurice, thank you very much.
yeah. So Maurice training, I say values. you implement values, just like you ought to teach your children in the house, because
Okay,
you want to make sure that they always do the right thing. And the only way, you
perfect.
can't keep watching them all the time, right? It's like
No, no,
I'm,
absolutely.
I'm
But let me
driving
tell
behind.
you, let me tell you what companies actually do. They do exactly what you just said. They introduce rules, they introduce procedures, they introduce training, they introduce management systems, right? Now we've got something in place. We've got rules, procedures, policies, if you do this, you get a consequence. If you do good, you get a reward. That's what companies do. And this is called the dependent phase because employees depend on the company for their safety. They don't like it. We don't like rules as humans. We don't like people putting rules on us and etc. Right? But we do it. We follow the rules because there's a consequence. If we don't follow the rules, there's a whip basically. There's a stick. So we follow the rules. Now, my father-in-law, he immigrated to Canada in the 70s, and shortly after he arrived, he bought a taxi limo. So this is a taxi from the airport, basically, that functions from the airport. And he was telling me that in the 70s, you could drive around in Canada with no seatbelt, right? Now, the government was depending on people's natural instincts. You want to wear the seatbelt, you wear your seatbelt. You don't want to wear your seatbelt, that's up to you. But eventually, the government looked at the statistics and they said, hey, we're killing a lot of people. There's a lot of people dying from road accidents. So, what do you think happened in 1976? The government introduced the seatbelt law, right? Now, my father-in-law and his friends, they weren't really happy with that, right? We don't need the government to tell us how to be safe. I can be safe by myself. I don't need the government. So my father-in-law refused to wear his seatbelt. But he was driving on the highway one day, and a police officer stops him to the side. He says, look, you're not wearing your seatbelt. You don't need to tell me to wear my seatbelt. I know that. Here's a $200 ticket. He gives him his first ticket. Now, that didn't do anything to my father-in-law. He continued not wearing the seatbelt until he got hit with a second ticket. What do you think happened after the second ticket? He started wearing a seatbelt, right? Why? Because it's starting to hurt the pocket, right? It's starting to hurt the pocket. Now, if you ask my father-in-law today, right, 50 years down the line, would you wear your seatbelt? You're in the middle of the desert. There's no police. There's no cameras. Would you wear your seatbelt? What do you think he would say?
I think he would say yes.
He would say
He
yes.
can have it
Why? Because
part of his
it's
wiring
become
now.
it's become a habit, right? With time and with, billboards on the road from the government and advertisements on TV. And maybe he's seen a friend or two that have had accidents and could not put food on the table anymore. He has come to internalize the value of the seatbelt. And this is called the independent phase. This is the third phase, where you don't need the government to tell you to be safe. You don't need the company to tell you to be safe. You are safe because you have a value now that you believe in it wholeheartedly, right? It's now become a value. So you move from dependent, where you depend on the company, to independent. I do it regardless of whether the company tells me to do it or not. Now, independence is a great place to be, but there's one drawback, right? Independence means, look, I'm safe, I'm looking after myself. That's great. What do you think would be the fourth and final phase? So we have dependent, independent. The fourth and final phase
I
is
can take a
called
guess at this. So they get interdependence. All right.
they get interdependent. This is the group culture that we're after, where I look after you and you look after me. I've got your back, Dr. Rabia, and you've got my back. Going back to the story of the gentleman who jumped off the roof, right? People saw that he didn't look good. But was there a culture where I could intervene and say, hey, what's wrong? Let's go have a coffee and talk about it, right? That's the group culture that you're after. And whether you're talking about safety or quality, etc., this is the type of culture that we're after. You want a culture of interdependence. Now, how do we get to that? The Bradley curve tells us what good looks like, but what it doesn't tell us is how do we get there. And there's ways, there's a strategy to get to interdependence. But the most important element in the equation that I mentioned at the outset is you, leaders. Leaders are the most important element in the equation that can help get to interdependence. Let me explain how very quickly. If you are a leader, right, and if we take safety as an example, if safety is a box ticking exercise for you as a leader, let's say you're in the dependent stage, you're doing it because your company is forcing you to do it. There's consequences if you don't. If you have it as a box ticking exercise, what basically happens is everybody down the line under you is going to adopt the same philosophy. They're going to take it as a box ticking exercise as well. My leader takes it as a box ticking exercise. probably I'm going to take it as a box ticking exercise as well. Because my leader's priorities become my priorities. What your leader focuses on is what you're going to focus on. What if now your leader is independent and they say, hey, you know what? Safety is a value for me. And I'm actually doing it not to tick the box, but because I wholeheartedly believe it. What do you think the people down the chain how are they going to look at safety? They're going to look at it as a value as well. If it's important for my boss, if that's what he or she are looking at, that's what I'm going to be looking at as well. So leadership is the most important element in the equation that can drive cultural improvements. And this type of culture that, the reason I'm explaining the Bradley curve is because culture plays a huge impact on organizational health and well-being. Where do our leaders sit on this curve? Are they independent? Are they dependent? Your leaders are the ones that drive a culture of care, a culture of where the focus is on employee well-being. So leadership plays a very important role. Now, I want to conclude with one final story about this man right here. This man was the inspiration for me starting my PhD, actually. Now, in 1987, the company called Alcoa, Aluminium Company of America, global organization, multinational American organization, was not doing very well, right? So the leadership or the board at Alcoa decided to do something different. They decided to hire an out-of-house CEO. They decided to hire this man right here. And this man is actually quite famous. He was Secretary of the Treasury under President George W. Bush. But before taking on this role, he became CEO of Alcoa. Now, first week on the job, he's invited to Wall Street to basically give his CEO spiel of how he's going to fix the company, right? And he's invited to Wall Street. He goes to Wall Street. He enters an auditorium, about 250 analysts and brokers in the room. And he stands up at the podium and he basically starts like this. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you about worker safety. Now, the people in the room looked at each other like, are we in the right room? What the heck is this guy talking about? Because these guys are expecting, how are you going to bring the stock price up? Are you going to put more aluminum in cars and planes? What are you going to do to improve the stock price? That's what they're expecting, right? That's traditionally what a CEO talks about. But this guy was talking about how to make Alcoa the safest company in the world, right? So some of these people left the room and they called their big clients and they're like, hey, you need to sell your stock because this fool, this clown that they have at the helm of Alcoa, he's going to bring the company to bankruptcy. But with this strategy around, safety and care, in 1 year, the company started making profits. And the 13 years that he was there, he increased the market capitalization of the company by 900%. 900%, ladies and gentlemen. And my question to you is, how did he do it? What was the underlying meaning behind his leadership? Any ideas in the chat? I'm going to pick on you, Maurice, because I've heard your name several times now. Maurice, what is the underlying meaning behind his leadership? What do employees on the shop floor hear when he leads like this?
I think this is the word that Branko mentioned before, care.
Care. So Branko's seen this before, so I'm not going to give you the point, Branko. But care, right? Care.
Yeah.
And I want you to compare his leadership, Paul O'Neill's leadership, to Alan Mulally. I told you to take note of the first thing on his strategy, his working together management system. What was the first word on his strategy? Right? People first, right? So if you put people first, if you take employee well-being and you put that as the priority of your company, not just a priority, because priorities change, but the value, right? Then not only will you improve, whether it's safety performance or mental health, etc., but you'll improve the operational, the bottom line as well. We've got many examples. I can talk about Cynthia Carroll, CEO of Anglo American. She did exactly the same thing, got exactly the same results. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to drive towards an interdependent culture, if you want to drive better safety performance, better mental health in the company, if you want to improve your operational efficiency, if you want to improve the bling bling, the bottom line, then I encourage you. The evidence is there, the evidence is there in the literature, the examples are there. Embrace employee well-being as your value, and you will see amazing results. Thank you very much. happy to take on any questions in the time that remains.
Thank you very much, Islam. That was very interesting and inspiring. I'm both in safety. Uh, yeah. But I have a question actually. I've next to where I live, there's like I don't know, 100 construction sites probably. Oh, and I walk to the gym. And I see people, they're doing crazy things. And it's like the workers, some they take risk. They're like
Mm,
standing on something thin. And although they have this thing saying, our goal is safety first, our goal is zero accidents. But
mm,
then see people doing these things. I know that people like they have too much confidence, overconfidence in
yeah,
I call it bias to optimism. Nobody thinks about death. It's just like, oh, I'm better than everybody else. But how would companies manage something like that?
yeah.
Especially when
Look,
you disperse workforce, right? Like construction workers, like probably different than, I don't know, factory workers because they're like in sites and I have to go up buildings, floors, 5 floors.
yeah, yeah. Look, absolutely. There's endless number of companies that use it, as I explained, as a tick box exercise. We're doing it because it's a legal requirement. We're doing it to get in compliance with regulatory requirements. That's one way of doing it. And if you do it that way, generally you get, sometimes you get good results. Sometimes, if you don't take it so seriously, you get what you see on those construction sites. But really, the answer, as I preach all the time at my whole PhD is based on this. The answer is leadership. If leaders take it as a value, right, not as a box ticking exercise, but genuinely, if they truly care, then you will see that site transform from, hey, let's do safety because we have to let's do safety because we actually believe it's the right thing to do. Now, there's a strategy to drive culture change. Obviously, it's a long process and it takes concerted effort. But really, for me, like sites like that, it tells me one thing: it's just talking the talk. They're not really walking, the talk. Um, and that plays a huge, even, for driving a culture change, trust is a big thing. If you're not walking the talk, you're going to lose the trust of your people very, very quickly. And care has, a part to play in trust. But that's what I would say. These are companies that are not walking the talk. They're there for, the monetary value. I don't think these companies will be around in the long run because eventually, companies that behave in this fashion, they start losing their top talent. Um, and your competitors are the ones that are learning from their mistakes. They have the right things in place, and they will overtake you. It's not sustainable to behave in that fashion.
Yeah, yeah. I think probably also think maybe government should pay or put heavy penalties on organizations
Mm,
who have accidents that could repeat results of not taking safety procedures seriously. I think this is what hurts, right? When we talk about the money, once it starts hitting your pocket, and unfortunately, because this is what value is. Because if you were like filthy rich and they fine you 200, 2 times, 10 times, oh, I don't care. I'll keep doing whatever I'm doing, right?
mhm.
But that's
Yeah,
the all right. Well, once again, I would like to thank you, Islam, for for this lecture. It's been
but
very interesting.
thank
And
you.
I look forward to attending one of your workshops in the future, hopefully. Uh,
Absolutely.
and thanks everybody, of course, for, especially those who participated. We thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thank you, Islam.
Thank you, Dr. Rabia. Thanks, Knowledge Group Consulting, and thanks everybody for your attendance. And hopefully we'll meet you in person at some point.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
afternoon.
Thank you.